movie reviews are becoming like the mainstay of the Talkin Pop podcast. It seems like when we started this, it was at a time of year where it's like every weekend there's like a new like blockbuster film coming out that we have to go to the theater and see. And while I enjoyed watching Dune and I enjoyed watching No Time to Die, and I'm going to enjoy other films like Ghostbusters coming up, it hits different when it's the latest installment in the MCU. There's a different feel to it, and it's like, here we go. Like, where's this going? And all three of us saw Eternals over the weekend. I want to say all three of us have differing opinions. Like, Brad and I will agree a lot on this movie. Kelly, you not so much. I don't want to speak for you, but in our discussions leading up to this episode, you kind of let it be known
in our
that
texting preamble.
Yeah. Yes, that you are not aligned with Brad and I's thoughts on this film.
Not exactly. No.
So before we like go around the table here, like, I just want to like quick roundtable. Do you not agree? Like, there is something like super exciting about going and seeing the latest installment of the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The thing for me is that it's like we're over a decade now, are we not? Or in and around that mark?
Oh yeah.
2008,
easily, right? As far
2008.
So,
yeah,
we're well over. Math again. Listen, I think the thing now is that it's an event. It's an event. You know that if you got in kind of at the beginning, and it's never too late. If you didn't get in at the beginning and start watching Marvel movies, you can always go back and watch those now. But if you kind of grew up with it, and we kind of have grown up with it now, it's like every year, you know that there's going to be some sort of twist. You also know now they're building towards something again, another big event. And yeah, it carries weight when you go and see it now. And that's what even more kind of gets people's backs up when there's powerful people in Hollywood complaining about superhero movies, especially the MCU, that you're kind of like, just shut up and just leave it alone. Like, we're all enjoying it. Let us enjoy it. It's a saga. That's all I have to say. I love it. I love when these movies come around now.
Yeah. So I went and saw it in downtown Toronto, and COVID protocols are a little different all over the world, but in Toronto right now, things are as close to normal as they've been in a very long time. So this was the first time I've actually been in a full capacity movie theater. So I was sitting right next to somebody. We're both shoveling popcorn in our face. And so that really made it feel like an MCU movie, right? It was a full packed, sold out theater. We also had a row of 19-year-old boys in front of us who were providing some, comedic commentary throughout the movie. And again, I feel like it's an MCU thing. Like, those are the movies where people are yelling and cheering and laughing out loud and screaming at the screen. So yeah, it's there's so many people a part of this club of Marvel fans.
Yeah.
That there's sort of there's a different set of rules for going and seeing these movies in the theater. You can be obnoxious and yell and scream, and it's kind of a part of the culture.
Different. It's different.
It does.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the film. We don't need to explain the premise. Anyone who's watching this has seen it. So let's get in. I just want to dive right in and talk about what we thought. As it's become custom on this podcast and each movie review, I'm going to go first. So
Rob is always he's such a gentleman. Like, he's always,
because he can't keep it in. And me and Kelly just sit back.
Yeah. It's because I'm bursting. I'm bursting to at the seams. I have to speak. Like, the second I leave the theater, I think about doing this review. I think about doing this review, and I'm formulating takes in my mind. Okay. I really enjoyed this film. It's not without its flaws, but I really enjoyed it. So I was thinking back to when we did Dune, and one of the things I said that I didn't like about Dune is I didn't feel connected to the characters. I didn't feel emotionally connected to the characters. And one of the things that Marvel just does so well is make you feel connected to these characters. And I thought I liked, honestly, I liked all of them. I liked the entire team. Did I like their individual sort of like character arcs? Some were better than others, but in terms of like the performances and the characters themselves, I really, really, really liked it. I loved Kingo. I loved Festos. I loved Icarus. I loved, who else did I love? I love Druig. They were just like fantastic. Like, and each of them, like, and I love the way that like we would focus on a character and then we would see an event over the centuries that sort of plugs us into them and finds out what makes them tick. And that's the sort of backstory I'm looking for and what makes me feel connected. I loved the twist, the misdirect, where you're looking at the deviants and then all of a sudden it's like, no, it's Icarus, and who is a loyal follower of Erisham and the Celestials. And he is going to make sure that this plan happens. He will kill his friends and his teammates to ensure that the emergence takes place.
And his girlfriend.
So
deep cut.
My main thing that I liked about it was definitely the characters. Oh, and Selma Hayek as Ajax too. Really liked her. I thought her motives at times confused me. Like, she kept going on about like the people of this planet and they don't deserve. And I know that she was like referencing, to me, it was just kind of like, okay, I don't know. I kept sitting there going like, okay, you're telling us why you love all these people, but I'm not really feeling that from you. And like, that's a nitpick, but like, whatever. I loved all the characters. I laughed. I loved, like I said, I just want to make sure that I hit on him one more time. Kingo and his Kumail Nanjiani and his documentary filmmaker sidekick. I LOL'd multiple times at their dynamic, and that's
multiple
the great
cameras.
That's what Marvel does. It's so great. Like, they're so great at that. If I can just quickly just the one thing about this film that brought me down was the deviants. I thought the CGI on the deviants was questionable for Marvel Studios and Disney. I didn't think they looked particularly great. I thought they looked like video game characters, and I really didn't like the thing that I was kind of like, no, don't do this, was the final battle. Okay, Icarus does his heel turn, and we find out that they're all puppets of Erisham and the Celestials. At that point, so the deviants are a misdirect in this movie. Like, they solely serve to like distract you from or keep you preoccupied until the Icarus heel turn. Right. But then why is do we remember his name? The main deviant. Why can't I remember his name?
Ooh,
Crow.
I also just found out that that's
Bill Skarsgård.
Bill Skarsgård.
Yeah.
I did not know that until after watching the movie, because I kept thinking.
Yeah, I caught it in the credits, and I'm like, oh.
Yeah, I'm like, why does his voice sound so familiar? And then I checked it afterwards, and it was like, bingo. And I thought he did a cool job with the voice.
So yeah, Crow's the character's name. So once we find out about that it's the Celestials and Erisham, and this is his grand plan to set up the emergence, technically the Deviants and Eternals are on the same side fighting for the same thing, right? Everybody's just a puppet of Erisham. So at this point, I think we can do away with the Deviants, and we're setting up this like epic final battle where everyone is like going, looking at Icarus and knowing they have to fight Icarus, and he's the strongest one, and he's basically Superman. And it's to the point where Kumail Nanjiani's character leaves. He's like, I'm not. He literally says, "It's Icarus. We're not going to win." And you have this moment where it's like it's time for the showdown, right? And Icarus breaks into the ship, and you have this great moment between him and Angelina Jolie Thena, where he's like, you've never fought me before, and she's like, but I've always wanted to, and you're like, yes, let's do this, like, let's go, this is what we've been waiting to see. But then here comes this deviant, this completely pointless character who is taking away from this epic final battle scene. To me, like, I had one negative about this movie, and it was the deviants. I didn't like anything about them. I thought they looked terrible, and I thought they were pointless in a movie that I otherwise loved. Now, before I pass it over to you guys, because I've talked way too long here,
You haven't.
No, I wanted to. So I've listened to two different reviews of this podcast, and it's of this movie. Sorry, two different podcast reviews of this movie. I'm so wound up to get this point out, but I'm tripping over myself.
Get over it.
I'm listening to these, and a light bulb went off in my head. They're talking about all these different themes within the film, right? About like choosing one life over many lives and that sort of thing. And I realized, I'm like, when I watch the movie, because it's a Marvel movie, those don't necessarily register with me right away. And it's not because like they're not doing a good job. It's because I'm watching a Marvel movie. So I'm sitting there the whole time looking at Arishem the Celestial and being like, are you going to be the bad guy in the next Avengers movie? And I'm looking at Dane Whitman and going, are you Black Knight? Right. And it's like, so instead of watching the actual film, I'm looking for the pieces that are going to connect us to the next movie.
But that's part of the fun, I think, at this point with these movies. That's why so many people get their backup if they haven't seen them yet. And it's like, well, go watch them, and then you'll be a part of this game of.
But that's what I'm saying. But I think that all these beautiful sort of nuances in the story don't initially register with me because I'm not looking for them. I'm just like, when are we getting the next Celestial? Let's go. like that's all I'm thinking when I'm watching, and I'm being like, you're Arishem the Celestial, and you might be connected to Galactus, which means X-Men are going to show up, which means all these rumors about a secret war for the next Avengers movie are probably true. And like, this is what's going on in my mind while I'm watching. And that's what Marvel's done for me.
Yeah.
Like, it's just.
That even harkens back to our Venom review, because like a lot of people didn't like that movie, but like how many people were like, but that post-credit scene, right? Like, it's all about like I referred to this earlier as a fan club, and like that's what it is. It's like you're going and paying your membership fee to go and see these movies so that you can keep in step with the rest of the club. So yeah, no, I think that's actually I'm going to get into my part later, but I think like that is a part of like the Marvel culture. That is
it.
You're looking for those Easter eggs. Hence why there's podcasts like ours that exist that dissect these movies in great detail.
100%. So all in all, I love the film. And I love the characters, but I think a huge reason why I love the film is because I'm just seeing all of these things that I'm like, okay, this is where we're going. This is where phase 4 is going. And it was a lot of like there's a lot of little clues in there about like where we're headed. And I think that's partially what, like, I left the movie being excited about where the MCU is going, thinking more about where we're headed as opposed to like what I just watched.
Right.
And that, yes. So that's kind of what Marvel has done to me. And that is my diatribe to start this episode. So Brad, over to you.
Listen, I mean, you hit on pretty much all of it. I mean, that's how I was feeling at the end of it too. Like, I felt like, I mean, first and foremost, the big thing that I kept thinking throughout it, but besides the fact that I'm also trying to like, oh, so who's that? Oh, what does that mean? Oh, is this going to connect to somebody? Is somebody going to fly in right here? Like, you know what I mean? Like there was little things that you can't help at this point, but go like, oh my God, like, is this person about to show up? Or like, you know what I mean? Something along those lines of, because of the fact that there's been so much up until now. The one thing I'll say too, just before I get into my overall review of it, is I, based on the trailers, was very worried that they were going to be leaning almost too much on Endgame, meaning because the trailers were very like, why didn't you help when Thanos attacked Earth? Like, and it just seemed like they were playing that card a lot. And I was starting to get worried, even though I wasn't beforehand, some of the teasers were starting to make me be like, oh, are they afraid that this isn't going to land, and they're leaning too much on this?
I don't think that's for you though.
I don't either.
Yeah.
I don't either. But I know that more in hindsight.
Yes.
But it concerned me at the time.
Yeah.
But besides that though, the thing that I was absolutely the most excited about was this didn't feel like something I'd already seen. And to some of the people's points who do complain about all these superhero movies, sometimes it can start to feel a little formulaic as far as like, superhero is up here and then something happens and we have to rebuild the dike. And then all of a sudden we have to prove ourselves again. And then in the end, we're the hero and blah, blah, blah. It can seem a little systematic at times, at least in maybe like the very early phases of superhero movies. But this was something that was completely different, especially with what they've already set up in this universe. And I loved the fact that they were doing so much of this kind of like backstory of all these characters, like when they were together, how long, like what they did that has affected human evolution in a lot of ways. And as far as like their connections with each other, because a lot of movies have tried doing things like that. There's they played the trailer before the movie. It's one of Roland Emmerich's new ones where it's like the moon attacks Earth or something. I don't even know what it's called yet, but I'm like legitimately laughing out loud.
Moon attacks Earth.
Because it was like the Apollo 11 went to Earth and went into darkness for 2 minutes. And what happened during those 2 minutes? They said nothing, but was it nothing? And then it's like this whole thing. It's like they're trying to make it more than it is. And it's just kind of like
Moonfall.
Thanks, Rob.
Wow. I haven't caught that trailer yet.
Will we review this? I don't know. We'll see. Maybe we'll finally hit on one that I don't like. But listen, at the end of the day, stuff like that can go very sideways if you go a little too hard in the paint with the like, I drew this and now they drew that and this means this and blah, blah, blah. And it becomes too much about heavy-handedness in that area where it just seemed like actually like very natural. Like they kind of worked it into regular human evolution, but also the inner conflict between all the different characters and how they thought that maybe they should be stepping in more and how others said like, well, that's not our prime objective. Yeah. And all of these very important discussions that actually kind of lend itself to even modern day discussions that goes on with these kinds of things. Like how much should we be helping here? How much should we let other people deal with their issues and things like that? You know what I mean? So it becomes this very broad topic. I mean, they delved into everything from like, one of the characters in their gay relationship and like feeling like he was an outsider and just all the dialogue that really
Fastos, his arc to me was the most interesting because they show him at Hiroshima and he's the one who gives up on human. These people, we shouldn't be saving these people. We give them these gifts and they use them to hurt one another. And then it takes him being in his relationship and having a child to like restore his faith in humanity.
Yes, that one you took
See,
the words out of my mouth.
Messages aren't lost on you, Rob. Very good.
Well, again, but this is hindsight where I remember back and go, oh yeah, because at the time I'm like, is there a celestial there?
Yeah. No, but it's
very profound.
Yes, but no, all of those little things that sometimes get lost in movies like this, where it's very easy to just kind of go like pomp and circumstance and a lot of flash and bang and fighting and all of this. I felt like all of that maybe for the first time was like, other than say Endgame, because there was such a buildup between all of these other movies, was the first time in its own movie it really earned that fight at the end. Like it was kind of like, hey, we really built up these characters, we really built up these plot lines, we built up this very vast history with the characters and the depths of emotion that went on with a lot of really full performances in this as well. Richard Madden, I thought, especially at the end, I was like, wow, this is that he had a very obvious, interesting character arc. And so I think overall, yes, there are little things I was kind of like you said, as far as like maybe a little bit of pacing issues at times, a little bit of like, we're trying to wedge things in because it was a broad story. But beyond that, I was actually pleasantly surprised with the amount of information we got that they actually wedged into a 2.5-hour movie. That in and of itself was a win. And I think they've really set up a lot of very, very, very interesting things that they're going to be able to weave into these characters that are still around and bring in these new ones and have these very interesting storylines with these characters. Like I know we're getting X-Men. We know we're getting Fantastic Four. We know we're getting a lot of these things. The one gripe, and a lot of people have said this before, and this is such like but in my mind, I kind of was like, this is a pretty big event. Where's everybody else? Yeah. Why? Where's anybody? Where's the Falcon? Where's Winter? Like anybody? The Earth is getting messed up right now. Like nobody seems to be around. Yeah. That being said, very good movie. I really enjoyed it. I thought all of the actors did a wonderful job. And yeah, I could not be more excited now after seeing that to see where they go with the rest of it. Kelly?
I'm like, here she goes.
Well, no. Okay. So let me start with, you at the top of the show, Rob, already kind of teed it up that there's going to be a little disagreement on this movie in terms of our takes on it. But I think the one thing that we can agree on, and we talked about this last week, is this movie is drawing mixed reactions. Like there are good number of people in each camp. And I think that's because of some of the things that I'm going to talk about.
That's good though.
Yeah, so let me start with the things that I liked, because I don't want to sort of set out the illusion that I hated this movie. I certainly didn't hate it. So the things that I liked about it, one, I liked that they were doing something different. So there was no part of me that walked away from this movie having taken issue with it because it wasn't cookie cutter Marvel. I actually really appreciated that. And I think it's the right thing to do at this point. I think they've been doing it with shows like Loki. Like I'm good. I'm good with this. Let's keep going down that road. I also loved most of the Eternals. I walked away from that like I got a crush on Druig. Like I loved him. I just loved his like, he's just an interesting
looking dude.
Oh, he was just so cool. And like, I just really I thought he was fantastic. Kingo is obviously the comic relief, serves that role very well. Phastos, like Rob, you mentioned that scene, the Hiroshima scene. That is the most emotionally heart-wrenching scene in the whole movie. So I really loved that character. I loved Makari. So these were all characters that worked for me. So those are the parts of the movie that I liked. And then there was just things about it that didn't land for me. So, I mean, you're going to read this across the board in different reviews. This movie is long. It is very long. And it kind of feels long. Like we've talked about some other movies on this podcast, and some of them we've said, it was 2.5 hours, but it didn't feel like 2.5 hours. This for me felt like 2.5 hours. And I think for me, it's because we had so much that we had to get through. And I think that they spent their time in interesting places that maybe I would have done a little differently, pretending like I have any sort of authority on this, on this subject. But the main thing being that I think they spent a lot of time on the Cersei Icarus love story. And I get that serves at the end because Icarus chooses not to kill her. But I don't think we needed to spend as much time with those two, like watching them, like make out on the beach and get married and there was just a lot of time invested in those two. And to be frank, I found those two characters pre-heel turn to be the most boring characters in like I was just Cersei was just a little bit of a snooze fest for me. And I think that's because there were a lot of aspects of this movie that were told to us as opposed to being shown. And that's where I was struggling a little bit. So a couple of examples were, you know, at the end, like Cersei's got to come through. She's doubting herself and her abilities. And Thena goes and has like a little pep talk with her. And Thena says to her, "You've always loved these people," like sort of suggesting that Cersei has a level of love for humans above the rest of the Eternals that makes her special. When did we see that? When did we see Cersei like really, like for me, that was, and if it was there, it was a fraction.
Yeah,
right?
that's kind of what I hit on with Ajax too. Like it was a bit like they relied on you in the sense like, oh, you've seen the Avengers movies, like you know how great these humans are. That's why they care about them.
Yeah. So I didn't feel that. And then, you know, earlier in the movie, you have Druig, chef's kiss. When they go to get Druig and they're in like Druig's little hometown, and you have Kingo talking to Sprite, and it sort of illuminates for the audience that Sprite is in love with Icarus. Okay. Like
I want to put a pin. I want to put a pin in Sprite. I want to put a pin. Yeah.
But I didn't, again, maybe there was a little hint of it earlier in the movie, but I didn't feel it. Although I will say I really loved the Peter Pan analogy. I thought that was really clever.
I thought so too.
But I just didn't feel it. And like, so I think like that's where I struggled a little bit. Like I was like, because they have to get through so much, they're really relying on like just sort of expletively telling us like she really cares, so that's why she's the leader. And I was just sort of like, maybe if we spent less time making out on the beach and more time showing her like really connecting with humans, or maybe there was a moment in which humans did something for her, like I would have felt that more.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said for, and I think a lot of people kind of thought this going in. I know what you're saying. I agree, but I also think too that it's partly the fact that I wonder how much of that was actually in there. And because this seems to happen a lot in movies now, you find out later that it's like, oh my God, there was like a 5-hour long movie and they cut it down to 2.5 or what have you.
Sure. I think they cut the wrong parts. If that's the case, I think they cut the wrong parts, because there's just little aspects of this movie that I'm like, okay, move on.
Do you know what it reminds me of? Because people had an issue with these movies when they came out too, when they released the Hobbit movies, because there was so much hype from the Lord of the Rings movies and there was so much character building, but it seemed like the max number seemed to be like 7 or 8 characters you seem to be able to sink your teeth into and kind of digest, but you knew you were slowly going to get more. It was like they tried to jam another like 5 characters in there on top of the initial 7, and there's just not enough time. There's just not enough time to fully flesh out these characters. And unfortunately, I do think it ends up having to be a little kind of like spoon-fed, like, hey, she does love them more. But it's like, I get why that's frustrating, but it's also kind of like, I do think if you hadn't built up that love between the two of them and that little bit of a love triangle between Richard Madden and Kit Harington as well, I think it becomes a little too just like, I don't know. All right, I don't know.
I'm gonna jump back in here, Brad, because
go ahead.
2 of my other gripes with this movie on and so actually last week we talked about Marvel fatigue. And so here are 2 things that I think maybe, I'm not sure if I'm going to call it Marvel fatigue, but are kind of under that umbrella. One was, I love a good character setup. I love a good Easter egg. Dane Whitman, Kit Harington, could have been not in this movie and it wouldn't have mattered worth a damn. Like he was there to be introduced as Black Knight.
Yeah.
We really didn't need him, right? And so again, like I don't mind.
It's a damn cool character though.
Listen,
I'm excited.
Like, and this is coming from like this is a Marvel fan who likes all that stuff. But when we've got 2.5 hours of like lots of stuff to get through, the fact that we're trying to introduce 10 Eternals plus a peripheral superhero we're going to introduce in a few movies from now just felt like a moment in which probably Chloe Zhao just had to go, all right, we're introducing Black Knight, because that didn't feel, that felt like a Marvel shoe-in. My other sort of Marvel fatigue challenge here, and this is where I'm actually got a little bit of concern moving forward for these Marvel movies. And Brad, you sort of touched on this earlier.
Okay.
We have a gigantic rock-sized monster celestial man coming out of the core of the earth, and nobody really seems that concerned.
Yeah.
And nobody seems that bewildered by it. And then you've got like Kingo's valet Karun, and he's hanging around with a bunch of immortals and watches, Icarus shoot stuff out of his eyeballs, and he's not really fazed by that either. And I just kind of feel like, have we reached a point in this world where there's so many heroes and so many powers and so many things that even the people within the world are no longer fazed by it? So then how are we as the audience supposed to be fazed by it? Like it just felt very like that portion of it. I'm going, nobody, like everyone's, and he's just like, you're gonna, I don't know, like
Kelly, these people of Earth went through the blip.
But that's what I'm saying, right?
No,
so this isn't necessarily this isn't even necessarily like an Eternals problem. I think it's like a Marvel problem.
No,
right?
they're at the point where it's like you gotta suspend. Yeah.
How do we make anything exciting anymore after half the universe was snapped away? Literally, like I even thought, you have the Celestial like coming out of the thing, and it's like the way that they it looked really cool, and the way that they chose to sort of like grounded in real life was to have a news report just being like, wow, this is weird. And it was just sort of like, what? Like so
my God.
Yeah. And like at the
nobody's
end,
watching.
Like,
they're like,
and like, I know we're kind of establishing that Kit Harington has like, some sort of like supernatural-ish background, but then like Cersei's explaining everything that's happened to him at the end of the movie. And he's just like, so you can't turn me into a giraffe. And I'm like, a lot just happened. Like a lot just happened here. Like
imagine actually being part of this Earth now, where like these events just like keep happening. We think there's some kind of like
so
space
desensitized, cadets. So numb.
we think there's space cadets after COVID. Imagine people on Earth in this world where like every like couple of years there's like some massive event where the world almost ends, or like your family members disappear.
But I've been on this. We talked about this last week, and this speaks to the point I made where they've set the bar so high with like Endgame and stuff. They've officially reached the point where you got to suspend your disbelief with that stuff. Like this world is so big, and there's so many, you can't there's no possible way now. They've done so many of these movies. So many different things have happened, so many characters, so many stakes. It's impossible to have it all make sense at once. It's just impossible.
Yeah, so I think for me, what I'm finding, and this is, a bit of personal preference here, is I think for me, the way out of that is less in this Eternals world and like global universe, implications, which is where we're headed. So I'm just going to have to deal with it. I'm excited for like, when, spoilers, we're going to get into this. I'm excited for Blade. I'm excited for more street level characters with like street level stakes. Like that's why like a show like Daredevil is so great to me, because it's just like, it's a small problem, but it's good. Like that's what I'm looking for.
I think in phase 4 though, you're gonna get both. Like you're gonna get like you saw, like perfect example of what you're talking about is Falcon and Winter Soldier.
Exactly.
Like right. Yeah. But so you're gonna have those stories and like Moon Knight and like that type of stuff. But then in the cinematic section, you're gonna have because like this is what Marvel is, right? Is these galactic threats. Like if you look at like what, like who are the villains that everyone thinks are rumored to be like the next big bad, right? You have Kang, who's like a god. You have like we saw Arishem in the Celestials, and you have Galactus, who is a Celestial. So it's like it's gonna be kind of like they're gonna be dipping their toe into both here, and that's how we're gonna proceed with the MCU. Before I want to talk about like where this is headed, but I put a pin in Sprite.
Cute
this
Sprite.
was the character that suffered the most for me. I thought she was just kind of there the whole movie. She's a child, so I instantly found her annoying, and I didn't want her around. So and like it's just like
recess,
but
right?
But like she was just kind of there for me. Like, and she like I when I said earlier at the top that I connected to all the characters, she was the one that I didn't connect to. And again, I know that I have a bias. I can't stand children in movies, but like it just, she suffered. And I think from what you both kind of hit on, you specifically, Kelly, about all the stuff they're trying to jam into this movie, I felt Sprite particular as a character suffered. And like when they're just like, oh, she's in love with Icarus, I'm like, God, I don't want to deal with this. Like, where's Arishem? Like, I don't want to watch
Arishem.
I don't want to watch. Like, when are we gonna go back to the big thing where Arishem is like, Cersei?
Yeah.
You know, like, give me more of that and less of this Tinkerbell Peter Pan lookalike in love with Richard Madden.
There's listen.
I didn't care for Sprite is what I'm trying to say.
We got that.
We picked that up.
You didn't? No. So the I can understand some of these things. I don't know if it was just for me straight up. It was just the fact that it was different, that I liked it maybe a little bit more than even some of the more recent things where it's kind of like we're just expanding on the same characters we've already known for a while, or we're just, not going through the motions. They're definitely not, but it's just kind of like, this seemed like something that was just kind of like a real pot stirrer for me, as far as kind of like, oh, okay, like this is, wow, like we don't have anything else like this. And yes, there were some slip ups, I think, as far as like what you're saying, as far as like not necessarily getting to know all the characters well enough, or Tinkerbell not getting enough time to explain why she loved him or how long she loved him for or whatever. I think there's just like what you said too. I think there's at a certain point, I think you just kind of have to accept it. Like, accept that it's like there's just so much that you're going to get in this amount of time. And then Marvel's whole platform for all these movies is we're going to expand on it down the road. So you're just going to have to kind of take it at face value for now, as far as like, we gave you this much because that's the only amount of time we have. we can't have a 4-hour long movie. At least not for like a single iteration like this.
I do want to just say one character that we neglected to mention, who I also thought was in like the category of being fantastic, was Gilgamesh. Like I was just
going to ask about
so
Gilgamesh
upset.
and Athena.
Yeah.
I was just going to ask about that.
So like, and so the reason why I thought of him was just to kind of like, so I think like to encapsulate how I feel is like, we're heading into like a very expansive part of the MCU, and probably a more complicated part, right? To explain to the general audience and to like get people on board with everything that's happening.
Right.
I get it. That's where we're headed, and I'm on board to get there. But I think what I've learned, what I would take away from this movie, and if I had to sit down with Kevin and could just tell him, how I feel, is like, okay, we've got to spend a little more time in the right spots, because the chemistry between Thena and Gilgamesh and the chemistry between Druig and Makari were both established within like a scene. Like you really just felt it right there, because that was just like good character building. Whereas, like I said, we spent probably 25 minutes on Cersei and Icarus. And so I think like that's my takeaway, is just like, when we've got so much to get through, we've really got to hone in on like how we spend time with these characters and like what it is we really want to get across. And so, like I said, I think they hit it out of the park on certain characters, Gilgamesh being one of them.
Quickly, what did we think of Angelina Jolie as Thena?
I'm glad you brought it up. I actually kept thinking, and I actually thought this was probably part of the intelligence of the writing. I think everybody kept thinking she was going to play a much more like devious role or like some sort of twist with her. Just based on the stature of Angelina Jolie being who she is. And the way that we started to learn that she was essentially having like flashes of past memories and attacking her group of Eternals and what have you. I kept thinking like that she was going to be the one to be some sort of twist. Even before I saw the movie, I thought it was like, well, I kind of had a feeling she was going to be something bigger than just one of the Eternals. And she actually didn't. She was somebody who was just kind of a part of the team. And actually, I actually appreciated her being in that role more because that didn't happen.
Agreed.
And I appreciated her performance. It was actually very understated in a lot of ways, and also very
she has the smallest like role.
Yeah,
like she was I almost am like I thought she did just fine. I'm almost having trouble like drawing too many conclusions about how I felt about her, because it was just she kind of was there to serve her purpose, and she did, and she was Angelina Jolie. She brought that like badassery to her, that's kind of her thing. And the 19-year-olds in front of us kept going, "Oh my God, she's so hot," every time she was on the screen.
Oh my God, that's awesome.
And so we're like, okay, Angelina hasn't lost it. She's still
no, she definitely has not. Angelina definitely has not.
Yeah.
I said that to my fiance when I left. I was like, man, that Angelina, she's something else.
She still got it.
But my man Kevin left me hanging though. Like I said earlier, I was waiting for like that line was so great when like, because they were like right from the get-go. You're like, Icarus and Thena are the two strongest warriors of this group. And they lock horns, and then they say that great line, and then it's like, nope, here's this stupid deviant to screw everything up. So that's my main thing.
And then just before we get into post credits here, Rob, I just want to say the Flash movie should take a hard look at how they did Makari's effects in this movie.
Yeah.
I thought her speedster CGI like looked fantastic. Like that is one thing. The effects of all the powers looked really great. So, that was one thing I thought. I was like, this is how they need to do it.
Okay. Where are we headed, folks? This is the type of stuff that gets me so excited, is sitting and talking about this. Let's get it out of the way. We'll talk like Dane Whitman is the Black Knight, and that's that, and he'll show up later. Good talk. So now we're going to talk about where we're going with the Celestials and where we're going with the reveal of Harry Styles as Eros, aka Starfox, brother of Thanos. First of all, let's talk about this post-credits scene. This, as you said earlier, Kelly, that it was like a return to like pre-COVID times a bit in the movie theater. It was the same with us. And when he showed up and he emerged from like the shadow, the theater went, oh, like it was like audible gasp, but like, oh my God, it's Harry Styles.
Sugar hot.
I want to get your thoughts on this, because I've got a whole bunch like as soon as this movie ended, I did a deep dive into like the history of Eros and his relationship to Thanos and what it all means, and like this character's past and what have you. But what did you think about the post-credits scene? And it's kind of like how the movie ends / the post-credits scene, like Arishem coming and grabbing the remaining Eternals and like pulling them off of Earth, and then we go to the ship that has Thena, Makari, and who's the third one that's on there? There's a third one on there.
Druid.
My boyfriend, my boyfriend Druid.
Yes, Thena, Makari, and Druid, and then Eros emerges. So, give your thoughts on this post-credit scene.
I mean, I'm no slouch when it comes to like Marvel, but I don't know what's coming next. This is now getting out of my area of expertise.
Might as well.
So I watched it. I was like, cool. Harry Styles, weird CGI on Pip.
Oh yeah.
Patton
Oh
Oswalt.
yeah.
Question mark. That's how I felt. That's how I felt about that scene. And I'm almost kind of now like, Rob, you've done a deep dive. I kind of walked away being like, I'm one of those fans now who doesn't know what the hell's going on, but I'm just gonna keep riding the wave a little.
Walking along.
Yeah.
That's how I felt too. Yeah, I did the same thing. I was very like, oh, I don't know who that is. like legitimately. And again, for the millionth time, I'll say it. That's okay. Like, I was just kind of like, okay. Although the one thing I will say was, I don't know if it was just the way they presented him or whatever. It literally looked like Harry Styles had just stepped off the stage of one of his performances. Like, that's how he kind of dresses. And so I'm kind of like, is that just supposed to be Harry Styles? And then I like, it took me a second to actually kind of like snap out of it. I thought it was a joke for a second. And I was like, whoa, this is a really heavy-handed joke for Marvel. But then it was like, oh no, this is actually Harry Styles is in this, and he's playing a character. It looked like Harry Styles. It sounded like Harry Styles. It was just very like, I don't know, jarring to me to see it like presented that way. And then what's the other guy's name? I'm not going to pretend like I know them.
Pip.
Pip.
Yeah.
Go back and watch the first Harry Potter movie where with the level of CG, like that's what that looked like to me. And it was like,
oh, dude, the CG, I didn't think the CG in this movie in general was very good. Like there was
a lot, and
it was up and down for me. It was up and down.
Yeah, that looked not great.
No, it looked like okay. You did your research, Rob. Enlighten us, please.
So, yes. Eros, the brother of Thanos, as if you may have picked up on when he showed up on the ship, he looked at them and said, "Fellow Eternals."
Yes.
So Eros is an Eternal. Thanos is also an Eternal. Why does Thanos look so different from, and this is from like comic book lineage. Why does Thanos look so different from Eros? Because Thanos is part deviant. And so we're getting this whole thing now where, because obviously we're going to the next layer, right? Like Thanos was the big bad in the first phase, or the first three phases, I guess.
The whole thing. We're
going one layer above now to the Celestials, the creators of everything, who even created him.
Right.
So now if this is the route they're going to go, where Thanos is also an Eternal, this is going to completely change like how we look at him in previous movies. And like, this is all from the comic book, right? So it's like, and if you look at Marvel's history, like they're not going to deviate from that. So
yeah, not in a meaningful way anyways.
Yeah. So it's looking like that's the direction we're headed in. And when you read about the history of Eros, aka Starfox, the casting of Harry Styles makes sense because the character and Thanos never get along because they're completely different. Thanos is a mad titan obsessed with war and destruction and all this kind of stuff. And whereas Eros is somebody who, the thing that I kept reading about Eros, yes, is he's very flamboyant. He's very sexually charged, is like, yes, he's a womanizer. He's like
watermelon sugar high. There you go.
Yes, this is the character. So when you read about this, it's like the casting of Harry Styles actually makes sense if you're going for this sort of like, it's all good, man, type character, right?
Playboy,
Playboy type character. Like he literally, if you look him up on like Wikipedia or whatever, you'll see the word like womanizer in there.
Okay,
like that's the way this character has always been.
So Olivia Wilde's not gonna like that.
Oh
no. So like, I mean, after reading it, like, because I was like you guys, at first I was like, well, I don't know if I like this, but then when I did, but I'm obsessed and I have to know. So after doing my research, I'm looking at it in hindsight and being like, no, I get this. I get why they're going this route with this specific character. And it just means like this, like you're going to hear me say this a million times when it comes to Marvel. They've set the bar so high. So they're now at a point where it's like, we're going even higher, right? It's like, this is going to lead. And if you read the backstory on the Celestials and these beings who created, like, basically the creators of everything. And one of them, the famous X-Men villain Galactus, is a Celestial. Kurt Russell's character from Guardians 2 is a Celestial.
Yes, I remember that as well.
Yeah. So it's like, that's where we're going here. And
for sure,
it's really, but they also are developing this other big bad in Kang. So it's like, where does Kang and the Celestials, like, there's so much going on. And if you wanted to point at something, if I didn't have the utmost faith in Kevin Feige, I would be looking at this right now. When you look at what's going on with the Celestials, what's going on with Kang, what's going to happen in Spider-Man No Way Home, where they're going to blow the multiverse wide open. Like, I'd be looking at this going, we're getting a bit off the rails here. But because I have so much faith in Kevin Feige and his vision, I'm not really worried about it. I'm really excited about it. And this man is no dummy. And this is all going to come and connect. And I swear to God, they're like, you guys have seen me in my reaction for everything to do with the Batman. You're going to get that same exact reaction when it's like Avengers 5 Secret Wars. I'm going to be
we need to add to add to this podcast, like, the Rob Batman counter.
Yes.
And every time you say Batman on this podcast, it's just like, bing, and it just goes up, because we'd be at 400 by now.
We need one of those old graphics from, like, the original Batman series that just is like, pow.
Because no, but seriously though, it's like there's a bunch of, like, there's 3 main storylines going on here. You could say 2, because I think Kang and the multiverse are kind of intertwined. So you could say Kang and the multiverse are one, and then this whole thing with the Celestials and the Eternals is another. But this is where we're headed, and it's going to culminate in some sort of, like, galactic battle.
But that's cool.
and that's where the Fantastic Four comes in a little bit more. Like, we are like, we're getting more into space and all that kind of stuff. Are we really not going to talk about Mahershala for a moment here?
Oh no, we will absolutely talk about him if you want to, because
because you went right past that Dane Whitman post-credit scene, and you just overlooked the fact that it is Blade talking in that scene to him at the end.
Yes.
So that's a whole other thing where, like, we're getting into space, we're getting into time travel, and now we're getting into vampires. And I'm here for some vampires.
Yes. No. I was going to come back to Dane, but I really wanted to get to the Eros. The main thing I wanted to get to is Thanos is an Eternal.
And
which
Harry
is interesting.
Styles is a sexy beast.
Yeah.
In the galactic
deviant
world.
Yes.
Sexual deviant.
Yes.
Everyone. Hey. You're welcome, everyone. No, the Blade thing was interesting. I didn't know what I was hearing. I thought it was cool. I did have to look it up after I saw the end credit. I didn't know exactly what that was that I heard. And then when I read what it was like, oh, holy crap. Like, if anything, it made me want to watch that post credit again. Mahershala Ali was born to play Blade.
Oh my God. Yeah.
That information was announced forever ago now, which feels like 2 lifetimes ago. But the oh my God. Like, from the moment, again, speaking of, like, texting and conversations that we've had in the past, like, I remember when that information came out, we were all losing our minds about that casting. Could not have picked somebody better. And to the point where it's almost like I almost kind of forgotten about it. And then where it was like little things would get mentioned here and there, and I'd be like, oh my God, yeah, I'm so excited. And then I kind of forget about it again. And this fully brought it back to that again, because I didn't know who it was. And then I read who it was and lost my mind. And it was like, oh yeah, oh my God, they must be getting ready to release this soon. I don't know when it's slated to come out. Is it next year?
No, it doesn't have a date yet.
We've still got a ways to wait, which is why, like, I was getting a little worried that, like, oh no, is this one going to get put on the shelf? Like, it definitely is one of the weirder directions. but then this makes it real. So I'm
Mahershala
stoked.
called him. Mahershala called Feige.
Oh yeah,
I remember that.
Yes. Yeah,
like,
Mahershala called him and was like,
2 Oscars.
I'm playing
I want to
Blade.
play Blade. I want to play Blade. Here's my friends, Mr. Oscar and Mrs. Oscar.
And Feige, I love Feige's quote where he's like, when your assistant buzzes you and says Mahershala Ali's on the phone, you stop what you're doing and you answer the phone.
He's
so
such
good.
a brilliant actor. I'm so excited. I'm so excited to see him in the MCU.
Before we get out of here, I just wanted to geek out with something about you guys. So obviously we all know what the next installment is in the MCU.
Yep.
Spider-Man No Way Home.
Mm-hmm.
They released the poster. If you zoom in the back of the poster, you can see the Green Goblin.
Green
Yes,
Goblin.
Flying it on his glider.
I think there you can also see Sandman a little bit. Like you kind of see some sand kicking up in the background. It's not as fully formed, but people are also sort of speculating about that too.
Yes. I think this movie is going to be like Eternals had a good weekend and some movies have had good weekends, but I feel like the box office as a whole still is feeling like a COVID effect. Like people are still right. Mm-hmm. I think this is the movie that's going to blow the doors off and everyone's like, I'll wear my mask for 3 hours because I have to watch this. Like,
wear your Spider-Man mask.
Yeah. Get your advance tickets.
Yes. Like this, I think this movie is going to be just, let me ask you guys a question. Would you release another trailer or would you just leave it at that?
So
I mean, they're definitely going to,
but we're not that far out, man.
I read, and again, this is just on the interweb, so who knows? But I read that part of the reason why there hasn't been a trailer is because there's been a bit of a rift with Marvel proper and Sony about how much to show in this trailer.
Oh wow, what a shock.
Yeah, shocking. And then also if you kind of go again deep into the internet, like this is like the Reddit pages. That poster originally, or in some people like posted on like bus stops and stuff, like some people said rumors, but like that Green Goblin and all that weren't originally in that poster. So I think you've got Marvel wanting to hold it back and you've got Sony wanting to put it out front. I think regardless, this movie is going to bring in a truckload. So
like the thing that I don't understand, Rob, hold it for 2 seconds. I got to get this out, but you're going to give you an ulcer.
His head's going to explode.
Yeah. Just hang on. The thing I don't understand at this point is it's like, you have one of the best properties in all of like anything, books, cinema, comic, whatever you want to call it. It sells itself at this point. Everybody already knows. Everybody's already picking their teams. Are you team Toby? Are you team Andrew Garfield? Whoever. It's like everybody's already having these like banter conversations. We actually talked about this on the last podcast. Word of mouth is everything. And you know what?
Even
also
the people who don't know are gonna hear from people who saw it. Correct. Oh my God, Andrew and Toby are in it. You gotta see it. You gotta see it. Right?
Exactly. So here's the thing. You don't need to show us. You just need to go, what, like that one trailer was just like, ooh, and like little pictures here and there. If you want to do like maybe one more that's very like, I don't know, ambiguous as well, like the other one, maybe give us like a little bit more, maybe give us like a little bit of something with somebody's head turned or something. Okay. But like,
leave.
Like just, go ahead. Go. I can't. I made you wait long enough. I've made him wait long enough.
You screwed this character up twice. You screwed it up twice. You finally gave it to Marvel and Disney, and they fixed it. And now you want to screw it up again. Butt off. Back out. Leave it alone. You don't know what you're doing. Stop. Stop.
Yeah. You said it all.
Also, if you're gonna do one more trailer, do another villain reveal. Don't give us Andrew and Toby. Give us Norman Osborn. Give us Sandman.
That's what I'm saying.
Us Lizard.
Well, especially now that they've done it in the now that it's in the
Yes.
poster, I think it's like fair game. Like whatever, go ahead.
Give us a little something.
To answer your question from earlier, Rob. Like I'm good without another trailer. Like they have my money. I'm going. We're gonna review it on this show.
Yeah.
I also feel like I have to bring this up before we fully get off the Eternals thing, because we talked about it in last week's podcast in the lead up to Eternals, was we mentioned, to everyone's shock and to mine because you didn't know, was the whole Superman and Batman references. How did we feel about that? Just very quickly. We don't need to spend a ton of time on it, but I need to know. I need to know how you're feeling.
Rob, I'm just gonna like piggyback off what you say, I think.
I don't want to toot Kelly and I's horn, but I think what Kelly and I were saying, where in this world they're like fictional comic book characters, is what they were getting at. Like I don't think that they exist. I think it's like because and another thing that proves my theory is the scene where they're in Phastos's house and Richard Madden Icarus picks up the Star Wars like coloring book. So that's like alluding to like Star Wars is also fictional in this.
I was gonna say
universe.
Because I was like, are they? Is this like a legitimate shots fired from Marvel to DC, like actually in a film? Because that's kind of not messed up, but just like it was
meant to like
it's
just
fair game. But like I was like, whoa.
I think it was meant to just hammer home like how long these characters have been around, and like I just think Chloe Zhao described it as like a nod. And
I thought it was just cutesy poking fun.
Brad, I'm about to blow your effing mind.
Wait, let me brace myself.
The film that Chloe Zhao said was her biggest inspiration for Eternals.
Oh, I know. Oh, no. I already know.
Zack Snyder's Man of Steel.
I am not surprised to hear that.
Yeah.
Like, I'm actually not. Because this is a whole other podcast. I'm not surprised to hear that, actually. Yeah. I'm not quite as angry at this movie as those movies make me, but I'm not surprised. But that could be a whole podcast on its own, so I'll leave it there.
Well, at least Icarus didn't get sucked up into a random tornado and die inexplicably and ruin.
No, but maybe they should have done that instead of him killing Ajax. Maybe they should have had that happen to Ajax. Because then it would have been.
Or it was revealed that Ajax's real name is Martha.
Yes.
Imagine.
That would have been great too.
Oh my god.
I feel like
or we need a scene with Icarus where he just turns to Cersei and goes, "My world doesn't exist anymore."
Oh god. Yeah, no. And just quickly, one other side note. I know you two, I remember you guys maybe got a little caught up in the hype of the last season of Game of Thrones. But for me, somebody who was like a massive Game of Thrones fan, to be hearing Richard Madden and Kit Harington say, "I love you, Cersei," was a deep cut. Yeah. And I don't even know if this fully means anything to you, but I know people who were like big Game of Thrones fans must be feeling the same thing. And I wonder how much of a joke this was on set, because one of the main villains in that show was Cersei. And it was just like, it was such a bizarre thing to have both of them in that movie saying, "I love you, Cersei." It was like, what am I watching? Yeah. What is this? But anyways, I also had to squeeze that in really quick because it was it was
Kit
disturbing
Harington
to me.
Ultimately becoming a knight.
Oh, hey,
yes.
There you go. There you go. Full circle.
All right. I think that'll do it for this week. Overall, like everybody, let's do thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs in the middle for Eternals. Kelly's doing a middle to down.
It's wobbling. Oh,
it's wobbling.
Next week, we'll be doing a deep dive into the similarities between Eternals and Man of Steel. I just want to find any excuse to get Brad to rewatch Man of Steel. That's my goal.
Thank you. No, thank you.
It'll happen. We'll save it for Brad's birthday episode.
Yes. I watched it 50 times trying to make myself love it, and it just never happened.
Too good. All right, guys, that's gonna do it for this week. Thank you so much for checking us out. If you like what you see, hit that like and subscribe button below. As always, leave a comment, spread a word, tell your friends, help us in the algorithm, all that fun stuff. Also follow us on our Instagram at Talkin Pop. And that's about it. Anything else?
That's the show.